You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, this is episode number 132 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. My name is Kevin Bruner. I'll be your host for the show. And before I dive into the intro for today's interview, I wanted to remind you that we love getting your comments and feedback. We use those to drive much of the discussion for our roundtable edition of the podcast, and that's where I'm joined by Chris and the Bolt to discuss news and the topics at hand for the day. So I wanted to be sure you knew all the ways you can connect with us. One of the best ways is in the comments section for each episode. Those are found at cdbabypodcast.com. You can also email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com, or you can call our listener line at 360-524-2209. We love getting phone calls. Those are great. And you can also connect with me directly on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, my Twitter handle is @KBruner. So on to today's episode. We'll be talking to Mike King from the Berklee Online School. Mike has held numerous positions in the music industry, but now finds himself running the Berklee Online School. Mike writes course material and teaches classes mostly geared around music marketing, which is something artists are always asking us about here at CD Baby. So I know you'll enjoy our conversation. Also, if you're not familiar with Berklee Online, it's the online school from the famed Berklee College of Music in Boston. You'll hear more about it in our conversation, so let's get to my interview with Mike. Well, joining me on the line is Mike King from the Berklee Online School. Mike, how you doing?
I'm great, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to have you on the podcast. It's been cool getting to know you over the past, 2 years. We've been kind of connecting online and have joined in on a couple of your classes, and it's good to have you on our podcast. So
no, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm such a fan of what you're doing specifically, but what CD Baby is doing kind of globally. You guys have been wonderful to work with, so I'm really happy to do this.
Oh, excellent. Well, why don't you start us off with some of your background in music marketing and how you got involved with Berklee and just what you're doing there, and then we can kind of launch into the conversation after that. Sure.
I could make this intro really long, but I'm going to give an abbreviated version. So, I am a fair musician, maybe not even fair. I play guitar and bass, but I'm more a music consumer, big time. In college I did some music writing. I had a good collection of music, and I wanted to figure out a way to make music part of my life, and I just didn't have the skills to go out there and play. So the route I took was at a record label. So right out of college, I worked at a label that was in Massachusetts called Ryko Disc. It was in Salem, Massachusetts. It was this wonderful place where I did a variety of things. So I started, like I think many people do in the industry, as an unpaid intern. And I kind of worked my way around. I wouldn't say I worked my way up. I started in the radio promotions department. And Ryko Disc catalog was so amazing. I was working right when I got there, Medeski, Martin and Wood's Shackman record, which was on Gramavision, right? And it went to number one on the jazz chart for CMJ when I was there. So I had like an early win, but it was this. The music was right up my alley. Another artist I was working on when I was there was Ali Farka Touré, this amazing guitar player from Mali, from Timbuktu. So I started working in the radio promo department, and then I moved into finance. I sort of just looked for openings and took them. So I did a variety of things in the finance department at Ryko Disc. I was responsible for consignment reporting, so that's Ryko Disc distributed maybe at the time 20 or 25 labels. So I reported back to the labels on their sales. I did royalty accounting, all sorts of, what many people might think is kind of dry, but I absolutely loved it. I loved seeing how things worked from a finance side. And then, Chris Blackwell bought Ryko Disc in 1999. And when he bought Ryko Disc, Ryko sort of split a little bit, and the bulk of the label, at least the employees, moved to New York City. So when I moved to New York, I started doing marketing, which is really where I wanted to be. I did tour marketing for a period of time, and I came back to Massachusetts, again, continuing to work at Ryko Disc. It was a much smaller version of Ryko Disc, and I was a product manager. And that was just a dream job. A product manager at a label is basically the quarterback, so somebody that would be given a finished master, and sometimes the master wasn't even finished. I would have to master, some recordings, but I would be, given a recording and work with all of the key areas within the label to put a plan together and be the main point of contact between the label and the manager and sometimes the artists. And it was just an incredible education to be working very closely with the retail department, the online department, the press department, the distribution company. So it was really wonderful, but all good things come to an end. And Ryko, there's actually one employee that still is sort of involved with Ryko from when I was working there in the 90s and the early 2000s, but it more or less kind of disappeared. It's a sub-label of Warner right now, Ryko Disc is. I don't know how many employees are still there, but I basically left in 2003. I worked at Rounder for a period of time doing publishing administration for the publishing company called Happy Valley, and I had some interesting experiences working with Studio One, which is a Jamaican label run by a guy named Sir Coxsone Dodd, and there were very unusual publishing kind of issues I was looking into for a short period of time. And then I came to Berkeley in mid 2003, right at the start of Berkeley's online school. So I've been involved in online education since 2003 in a couple of different ways. I wrote 4 of the online music courses for Berkeley. They're focused on music marketing and music business. I wrote 1 book for Berkeley Press, and I now run the sales and marketing for Berkeley College of Music's online school. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell, I suppose.
Wow, so you've been in quite a few different departments around the music business and have seen a lot of different things for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the hands-on experience was just, really invaluable. To be the role of the product manager is just such a critical gig, and at Ryko, when I was doing that, there was some degree of flexibility. I was involved in bringing some artists to the label that ended up getting signed. One band is called The Slip, in the late 90s, and I worked with, was kind of a little bit of a, I don't know if I want to say hippie, but I knew the people that, Fish Management, and we signed Pork Tornado, which was John Fishman, the drummer of Fish's band, and I brought those guys to Ryko. So it was just, it was a really great time, I suppose, and the gig specifically allowed me just to get a real kind of wealth of experience about how things worked.
So I guess to me, it's kind of interesting hearing your experience and just the era of the industry you came up in, and yeah. I can only imagine, and well, I can guess that the way you think about marketing has changed quite a bit since those days with the change of the industry. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, it is a correct assumption. It's not only the way that I think about it, but the tools that exist and the way that, and I suppose what is possible now. It wasn't possible back then. The major shift from a marketing standpoint is that marketing was somewhat reactive and not super data-driven back in the day. So really what we would do is there are various things you could look at, various ways to measure how you were doing. If you hired a radio promo indie, you'd get, weekly reports or daily updates, that sort of thing on what station was playing a record, how often they were playing it, that sort of thing. But the main sort of tool we used to determine how we were doing was SoundScan, so that tool still exists. But back in the day, it was one weekly meeting on Tuesday, I believe, is when the SoundScan reports came out. And, the marketing staff would sit around, we'd look at SoundScan and we'd say, oh, look at this spike, in Denver. We should connect with Twist and Shout and see what else we could do at that retail location, but it was very reactive. And it was difficult to test, So the main changes now are the tools are different, that can allow you to test, to allow you to look at things. And then pretty much the whole landscape has adjusted in terms of being proactive, as opposed to being reactive with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with in the marketing world that you definitely now have the tools that can connect and help you kind of, use data better and almost in real time these days.
That's true.
So I assume that a lot of people coming, or a good portion of the people coming to your classes at Berklee are artists that are wanting to learn more about marketing. Some that probably want to get into the business to work at a company, and some that probably want to learn how to better market their music. What are some of the key issues that you would say a lot of these people coming to your classes are facing and kind of trying to figure out in their minds?
Yeah, and you're right. There's a cross section of people that are taking the courses. There are definitely musicians in there that are trying to figure out how to make it. How to generate visibility for themselves and how to sell their music. And then there are people that want to work in the industry. And those aren't two. It's not kind of an either or thing. It's sort of like you have to learn both of those skills if you want to do either of those things, So the biggest issues, and this is something that we talk about quite a bit, people come into the class and they want to sell, or oftentimes, okay, how do I make money doing this, And to me, something I talk about in the class too is that's sort of the, in many ways, the last thing you should be focused on, right? It should be, and this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it now, you have to have good product. You have to be able to write good songs, and if you can play out live, that's very positive too. If you're not performing out, it makes things a little bit more difficult. So many things get kickstarted from touring. So those are the before you do anything, you have to have those things together. But it's for me, it's more focused on how do you make people aware of what you're doing. So I have kind of these four horsemen that I think you kind of have to focus on. It's awareness, acquisition, engagement, and then monetization, right? So once you've got great product, you can play and all that. There's a pro and a con to all of these tools that are out there to help people. There's more competition than there ever has been, so marketing is more important. And, finding ways to make people even aware of you, that's very difficult, and once people are aware of you, how do you get a permission-based contact happening? This is something I talk about in all the courses a lot because it's so fundamental. And this is, back in the day when I was at Ryko, it was about almost like it might be called like a shotgun approach to marketing. Just making, radio as an example. You kind of don't know who's hearing. There's some measurements, but it's difficult, and it's a one-time hit, and then you've got nothing else. With acquisition, if you can obtain some permission-based contact where then you control that relationship moving forward, and probably the best example of that is an email address. Still to this day, 2014 email. That's really important. And then once you are engaging properly, then it's time to think about monetization. Once you've had a community, you've built up a community, you're talking to them properly, you have this relationship, then think about monetization. So that's sort of like oftentimes people come in right away. How do I generate revenue? And that's, again, one of the last things I think you should be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that everybody wants to make money from their music, but oftentimes artists get a little ahead of themselves. And, any other business type transaction, you're going to spend time developing the product, kind of figuring out a story and all this kind of stuff, then kind of launch out into, building an audience and then ultimately trying to find the sales. So,
I mean, and you probably have some detail on this. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I forget what number tracks are in iTunes that have never been listened to. And I think somebody built a program actually that is designed to, or an app that goes on Spotify and only plays songs that have been listened 0 times, you know? So, I mean, and it's a super high percentage of songs that have never been listened to. So these are folks that aren't focused on that awareness part yet. They focus solely on the monetization before maybe they were ready.
Yeah, that app, I want to throw out that it was like something like 75% or something. It was something pretty big that tracks on Spotify that hadn't had a stream yet, and somebody did build an app for it. But
yeah.
But yeah, so when an artist is, finishing up with their product, what in your mind is one of the first things they should start doing? Is they sort of transition out of music creation mode into, now I need to get this out to the world? What are some of the first steps they should be taking?
Right. So I have kind of a linear graph in one of my classes that outlines what can be called a serialized approach to releasing content, Mm-hmm. So I think you should be focused on acquisition all the time. The biggest artists in the world should still be focused on acquisition. But I really like the idea of, if you've got something recorded, I think you can utilize free, right, to help you with that awareness part. You can generate all sorts of derivatives of your content even before release, So I might bounce around a little bit here with this answer, but
that's okay.
I'm friendly with the folks that run Pledge Music, and I really like that idea of, and even taking it back before what you said. So engaging your fans even before the product is there, right? Even before you've got something finalized for sale, So what Pledge Music does is it allows you to communicate with fans throughout the whole recording process, and you're engaging, and you can, give your fans something special. So that can happen, with Pledge Music, and it can happen without Pledge Music, parts of that, where if you've got that community, you're looking at your content, you're creating things, you're kind of floating things out there. And going back to data and analysis, you can even utilize some widgets to test out singles. And maybe, you're recording stuff. And somebody that does this really well, I think, is Anton Newcomb from the Brian Jonestown Massacre. He's putting out things on YouTube all the time. And I don't know what his thought process is behind it, but
he's a character, I can tell you that.
Oh, so yeah. I mean, he's a complete character. And I listened to we could do a whole podcast about what he's doing. I listened to Dead TV, this little program that he does, But anyways, he's putting out, it's clearly unfinished material, right? And he's floating it on YouTube, where he has this community of people that are commenting. Folks are, sharing this stuff. So I love that idea of, even before you've got something totally finished, kind of connecting with your community to say, hey, what do you think? And maybe not explicitly saying, what do you think, but floating things out there and seeing what people freak out over, And I don't know what Anton was thinking, and I'd love to talk with him someday. But, the record that came out after, his last record, it led with the song that I think was the one that was most highly received, right? So on YouTube, right? So did he use that data to determine what the sequencing would be on the record? Maybe, if I was him or working with him, that's exactly what I would do. So sorry, like I said, it's kind of a roundabout answer, but I think there's a lot that can be done even before you've got a totally finished thing to engage and to generate information for you to help you move forward.
Yeah. So when you're looking at some of these tools out there, I know that artists sometimes feel inundated with tools that help them market their music, from whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever. There seems like there's always something new popping up that people are being told, hey, you should use this great new tool to market your music. What do you think are some key tools that they should start with? Or if there's one thing that they need to do, what is it?
Sure. So one thing I would recommend, and you're exactly right, there are things popping up all the time. And the difficulty, and what I try to do is be a, and this term is getting overused, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it. I try to be a curator. That term is totally overused, especially now with streaming and all that. But it's accurate, right? So the first thing I would suggest people do is try to find some people that you think are good curators that can help guide the way, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many outlets out there that you can use to kind of separate the bad from the good and get a bit more clarity on what really you should be paying attention to. So there's something I refer to in my class. So I try to be a curator, and I stay on top of things, and I get a bunch of information, and I can talk about some of the stuff that I use. Actually, I will right now. I like that guy Ari's take, and he actually did a very fair assessment of CD Baby Pro and TuneCore, their publishing option. So and he did it. He went through and he talked to people. I think he talked to you. He did. So I try to find curators first. So I use, Music Ally is another one that I subscribe to, and everyone gets the Left Sets report. And there's all of these folks out. I think Glenn Peoples is excellent. Billboard.biz, and I have a column set up in Twitter that is only dedicated to people that I have deemed curators, and that's the stuff that I pay attention to. So before even talking about what tools to use, because I think it's different depending on where you're at in your career. I think it's finding the right people that are speaking to you. That you can look to help guide you. So I have. Let's see here. I've created a list on my Twitter of people. This is for a course that I taught in Northeastern, and I said, I've actually kind of dropped off on Twitter. I have to get back on it, but there are people that are very active that are very good. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of other tools, I do think it's valuable to look at two different things. I think that there are good self-service options out there to help you do things online. And that's kind of a wonky way of saying it, but I'm paying attention to companies like Stage Block. I'm paying attention to companies like Noise Trade. I'm looking at sites that help you, like Section 101. That's a website company. And I have I don't work for any of these companies, so I'm not endorsing them. I'm not doing buzz marketing right now, but these are really companies that are interesting to me, that I think are in it for the right reasons. Bandcamp. I have the luxury of working at Berkeley, and sometimes people would take my calls, So I've met Ethan Diamond runs Bandcamp, Jay Sider runs Bandpage. These are excellent people. Ethan Diamond is just a great person that's in it for the right reasons, So that's something that's important to me is, connecting with these companies, that the people that are running these companies are solid people that are really in it to help forward musicians' careers, because that's why I do it. I love talking about this stuff, and there's no better feeling to help a musician move forward, right? Anyhow, there's a number of different companies that I think are doing great things, but it's kind of too many to list right now, But I guess what I've said off the top of my head right there are folks that I would recommend other folks look into.
I know you're a big advocate of artists sending all their fans, directing their fans and using their website, their main band or artist website, and using that as the hub of their marketing. Do you think that's one place where artists are not doing or taking advantage of the opportunity that they have there with their fans?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I am an advocate of that, and I've gotten into debates with folks that work at companies that no longer exist that suggested, just send them to Facebook. Your fans are on Facebook. That's all you want to do. I mean, at the end of the day, you own the relationship with your fans, number one. You own the experience with your fans if you're sending them to your own site. You don't. We saw what happened when Facebook changed the way that they operated into timeline, right? Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think some of the opportunity relates to organic SEO too. With your site, and Bandpage is kind of an out of the box service, but they were built in a way that it's very optimized for SEO. So I like what they're doing a lot, but there are so many. There's a lot of opportunity, I suppose, with organic search, and I've done this myself. And again, it sounds like I'm doing buzz marketing. I don't mean to, but like I wrote this book, music marketing book. And if you Google music marketing book, my book comes up usually number one, right? So there's something around that. There are different things that I've done there to help with that response, and different. And you can get very in depth. There's a guy named Matt Cutts who works at CUTTS, who works at Google. That he's kind of like the oracle of organic SEO. I would suggest people follow Matt Cutts, but that's something. Number one, yeah, definitely having your own web presence. Looking at tools that you can use on your website, understanding analytics around your website, and then understanding how organic search works, so that if somebody is searching for you or something like you, you return high in the search results.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I know artists, it can be, SEO is like a whole podcast of its own. Yeah, it is. For a whole series of podcasts. In fact, there are some. If you're interested, you can go listen to. But yeah, it's one of those things that artists don't realize, that when you control your own website, when you put content in one place, it actually helps people find you, and also it makes it easier for them to get your music. I mean, honestly, I get frustrated. When I went to South by Southwest this year, there were some bands that I was going to check out, some that were on a label, and I went to their website and there was literally no information, not even about any of their tour dates, anything, and it was basically just a link to iTunes, which, if that's all I was looking for, that's fine. But then they were sending me to Facebook for tour dates, and then I'm digging around on Facebook trying to find it, and I finally forget about it. I don't care anymore.
Think how hard it was for you to even become a fan. Like, so they got you with the awareness part. You're aware of them, right? But where in what you're describing right now, where they failed is acquisition. And there's a whole, you could do a whole podcast on IA, information architecture, like how you organize your site, and, depending on what stage you're at within like an album release cycle. That's a wonky way to put it. But like, if you've got a record coming up soon, you want to put that information front and center. If you're focused on touring, you want your tour dates front and center. That it should be like a living, working thing, So yeah, totally. I'm trying to think right now. I used to use this example. There's a band on a label called Thrill Jockey, and it's not coming to me right now. Their website, when I taught at Northeastern, I'd bring this band's website up and just say, this is like what not to do, like no navigation, trying to be cutesy. I think the URL had nothing to do with the band, no SEO to speak of. There's some horrible things out there. So, and there's tons of resources. Like, I'm going to go back and check out your podcast on organic SEO just to check that out. I think, Bandzoogle, they do website demolition stuff. David Dufresne, those guys do some really neat things. So yeah, going back to what I would suggest in terms of tools and best practices, definitely the web stuff should be high on the list.
Yeah. So with we're talking about some of the fan engagement. Is there any things or techniques or the acquisition, I should say, that you've been talking about in your classes, or things that you have your eye on as interesting ways artists or record companies or anyone who's trying to engage and build fans have been doing lately?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's a hard question because everything is so specific to an individual band, right? So what works with one band isn't necessarily going to work with the other. Because the demographic and psychographic is different, So overall, I'm more impressed when I see a band that's doing like best practices in a certain vertical, So there is, I'm spacing on band names right now, but there's it's on the tip of my tongue and I can't remember. Email marketing. That's something that bands can do very poorly or very well. And there is a band that I can't recall, maybe I'll remember it, But somebody that I hired to teach this course that I wrote on Topspin software was involved in this band, and we were having a conversation about email marketing. And he said, "Yeah, their open rate is over 100%." And I said, "Well, how's that even possible? How do you get an open?" He's already told me it's over 100%. And he said it's because of shares, right? And still, it sounds a little funny to me, but he says, the email goes out to X number of people, and the subject line and content is consistently so good that people are sharing this thing like crazy. And then, again, it's a little bit of a funny way to look at it, but I'm impressed by that. So bands that have figured out exactly what works with their own community in a way that the community is sharing on their behalf. There's an idea by this guy named Clay Shirky called participatory culture. So there are many examples of participatory culture, but if you can put a foundation together that is something upon which your fans can build and start spreading the word, this is an older example, but something I really love that involves Creative Commons. There was a band that was on Network called Chaos, K-OS, and I loved this from an engagement standpoint, where before his record was even out, he released some stems for one of the songs out to his fans and said, "All right, guys, this is, I forget which flavor of Creative Commons license he gave it, but he said, remix this, pass it around," and there was a contest related to it. And I forget how he measured who got the most interest in their remix, but the end result was the best remix, the one that got shared the most or whatever it was, got added onto the record that wasn't even out yet. I hope I'm making sense with this, right? So stems from an unreleased record put out there. The fan-created remix got onto a record without the fan even hearing the original, I love that. I mean, that what an amazing way to engage your fans first off, but then use that idea of participatory culture for them to kind of help you market, that sort of thing is what impresses me.
Do you find that artists are sometimes scared of marketing or trying to build that kind of engagement? And I guess I'm coming from the angle of, here at, both of us work in marketing. So what a lot of people who don't work in marketing may not know is that we fail a lot, and we then go, well, that didn't work. Well, let's change this and try it again. Oh, that did work. And now we are getting better responses from our email. I find like a lot of artists tend to like send out an email and maybe get a so-so response and just go, well, I guess nobody likes me. And not understand that you're using a communication platform, that it takes time and effort to kind of tweak and test things.
That's it, So I think there's a couple of things. I teach this course called Music Business Trends and Strategies, and the lesson on marketing was last night, So it's, I had an hour-long chat about marketing last night, and some of the folks that were in the chat were saying, number one, wow, I didn't really realize all of this. And number two, how do you find the time to do all of this? That's the major thing, I think, is because you're right. I'm testing all the time, and with what we're doing at Berkeley, I mean, it's very in depth, as I'm sure it is for CD Baby, So we have nurture campaigns. We use a marketing automation software, I mean, we have a CRM, and I'm going to go on a tangent again for a second, but like one thing that I thought was so interesting about the last South by Southwest, and I don't know if you saw Lady Gaga's keynote. Were you there?
I did not see it, but I did watch it online later.
So she said, and I don't know who caught this, but I tweeted it. She uses Salesforce. Lady Gaga uses Salesforce, right? So she's like, I'm up to date with all. And Salesforce is this heavy duty customer relationship management software, CRM, and I'm like, whoa. And from what I could tell, like, she uses it. Like, she goes into Salesforce to, like, split up her lists and communicate with people effectively. So, I mean, going back to, like, folks being scared, I think it's less about that. I think it's daunting. It's like there is so much to do that in many ways, it depends on, again, where you're at in your career, but when you're at a certain point, you have to have some people to help you with this. It's just unrealistic. You'll drown, if you try to do everything possible. There's tons of best practices, but if you're responsible for writing, booking your own shows, recording, producing, all of that, there comes a point where you hit a wall, I think, So marketing is one thing that, again, when you're starting off, like you're doing it all, right? But once you reach a certain point, it makes a lot of sense to even elevate one of your fans. Hey, do you want to handle my web, or something like that? I just and the person that was talking last night about this being daunting, you're exactly right. Like I kind of laid everything out. Like, here's best practices. This guy got 105% open rate. But like really, like can one person do all of this? And it's a good question. It's difficult.
Yeah. Well, we've got to wrap up soon. So I was wondering if you had any final pieces of advice that you might want to leave us with, and then you can tell us about how artists can find out more about what you guys are doing over there at Berklee and the cool classes you guys offer and all that.
Oh, thanks for that, and thanks so much for having me on here. I love this topic. I enjoy talking with you, and I've been a fan of your podcast for some time, so I'm really happy to be part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really. The sort of thing that I want to say is stuff that has helped me to continue on, right? So when I reflect back on how I've gone through the industry and done different things, it's being tenacious, and it's looking for opportunities. And there's stuff that I didn't mention that I've done, nothing horrible. But it's sometimes, when I was an unpaid intern at Ryko Disc, the truth is half of the time I was working at a mutual fund company called Zurich as a registered representative. That was my real job right out of school, right? So part-time was doing that. Part-time was, doing what I loved, right? So maybe that would be my advice and I've said this before, there's a philosopher who masquerades as a cartoonist named Hugh MacLeod, and he's got this theory called the sex and cash theory, right? Where, when you're starting off, you're doing things for cash, and in your spare time, you're doing the stuff you really love. And best case scenario is all of your time at some point morphs into doing what you love all the time. But it's a long road, and it's a hard road, and you're going to hit walls and everything. But like I said, when I reflect back, I tried to see an opportunity and some sunlight and a path and make my way towards that path for my own particular goal, and everybody's goal is different. Not everybody's goal is to be international, pop superstar, right? So I really had my sights set on, I want to work in the industry and I want to learn as much as possible, and this is how I'm going to do it, and try to find those opportunities. I think the very same thing that process could be similar for artists, So I don't want to say, don't give up, stay with it, but I do. That really is it. If you feel passionate about what you're doing and you're on this earth to do this thing, find a way. You might be doing other things alongside of it, but find a way.
Well, I agree. I think that's good advice, because I think a lot of artists, especially now what we see in the media, seems like everyone that becomes big is an overnight success. They were on American Idol for 6 months, now they're selling platinum records.
Yeah.
Right? And this idea that there was no long road that got them there. And, a lot of the artists that we see popping up here that, they're an overnight sensation. They're like, yeah, it was a 9-year overnight sensation.
Totally. Absolutely. I saw that firsthand with this band called Carmen, where I was working. Amy Heidemann is in Carmen, the duo. She's obviously the female singer. And she worked with me at Berklee, and she was a Berklee student here. And I would, lightly consult with her, for a really long time. But the word on the street is, they did one cover on YouTube of a Chris Brown video. It got 40 million views, and they got signed by L.A. Reid to Sony. That's not really it. They are true musicians. They went to Berklee. They spent years, and they had a very focused approach to how they wanted to break, based on the work of this amazing manager. They're working with a guy named Niels Gum. Sorry, and he's excellent, right? But it was years, right? But like, it's funny you say that because I hear that all the time too. Like, oh, it's an overnight cessation just happened. It's never like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do like what you mentioned and kind of alluding to the idea of having an intentional path, something that you know you're shooting for. And I think that's a lot of times where artists kind of lose or kind of lose hope in ever being able to do something with their music, is because when they think about it, they don't even know what they're shooting for. It's just like, well, I want success or whatever. But I think it's when you have more of an intentional path, you can see those opportunities pop up and go, that's going to help me get to where I want to go, and I'm going that direction. So
that's well put. That's true. And I think education is important too, and understanding the landscape.
Which brings us to, how can we find out about Berklee?
Yeah. I truly do, but you're doing it too right now. What you're doing right now with CDB, this is education, and this is it.
Yep. Yeah. So how you guys do offer some really cool classes there, and how can people find out about what you're doing? And you might also want to explain the difference between the Berklee Online School and Berklee College of Music, because there was a while I didn't even really know there was a difference, but you might want to highlight the difference between those two.
Yeah. So I'm that's my job, is to make people aware of the difference, or the fact that we exist. So Berklee College of Music has existed here in the Back Bay of Boston since the mid-'40s. So the college has been around forever. Very progressive, amazing people have went to Berklee. In 2002, Gary Burton and Lee Burke, the president at the time, decided that they wanted to get an online school happening, and they did. I mean, it was a very forward-thinking idea to think. If you think back to 2002, there were no online music schools. So we exist to bring Berklee faculty, Berklee curriculum to people that can't come to the Back Bay. And the experiences are different. It's amazing here in Boston in the Back Bay. Berklee has amazing facilities. There are things that happen on campus that can't happen online. There's an amazing new building that's here that has just state-of-the-art, like the best studios in the country, are going to open, later on this year. So amazing things. The online school, bringing Berklee faculty, Berklee curriculum to everybody. We have courses, 12-week online 4-credit and non-credit courses available. We've got multi-course certificate programs, so you could study, you can become an absolute expert in Pro Tools, as an example, and study with Berklee for several years. And we just launched online Bachelor of Professional Studies degrees in music business and music production, and those are going to start in September. So you can get an online degree from Berklee College of Music in those two areas. It's a Bachelor of Professional Studies degree. So that's something we're all very, very excited about, and I'm very involved in that in a couple of different ways. Some of the courses that I wrote and that I teach are going to be part of the business track, of the Bachelor of Professional Studies. And then getting very specifically, I wrote a course called Online Music Marketing, and it has a bunch of words after that, but it's online music marketing, campaign strategies, digital distribution, and social media. I think that's the name of the course. Music Business Trends and Strategies is one that I wrote, which is sort of like a all-encompassing, we talk about copyright, we talk about publishing, we talk about fan funding. And then I wrote a course called Music Marketing 101. So I work with some amazing instructors to teach some of the courses that I wrote, people that are doing fantastic things in the industry. I have people like you come in as special guests who are experts in their field. So it's something that, and I said this earlier, maybe I didn't, but I meant to. I feel so lucky to have the opportunity, and it's really an honor to be able to meet with people weekly, and we have these hour-long chats where I'm on video and audio and screen sharing and everything, and just going through exactly what's going on right now and kind of what I was saying earlier, finding the paths for individuals. It's something that I love and I'm enthusiastic about. So I feel very lucky to have the opportunity to talk to people literally around the world. People are taking, I had somebody from Kenya in my last course, that in the last term. But it's an amazing opportunity. I love teaching it. There's a good community that grows online as well. So I feel pretty lucky to be part of it.
And when do the courses typically start? Because they are more like a traditional course. They do have specific start times, correct?
That's right. We have 4 terms. We have 4 terms a year. The next is beginning of July, and then the term that starts with the online degree programs is in September. That's the end of September. So 4 terms a year. After that, it's beginning of January, and then beginning of April. Like I said, the courses are 12 weeks long. So we build in a couple of weeks, kind of vacation time, in between terms. It's been, I've been doing it since 2007. I can't believe how time goes by so quickly.
Wow.
But it's like second nature, It's I've been teaching constantly for 7 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, Mike. We'll put some links on the podcast show notes that get people over if they want to check out more about the classes and what you guys are doing over there at Berkeley. Lots of cool stuff, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks so much, Kevin. And like I said, I really appreciate you having me on, and we so respect and admire the work that you're doing and the work that CD Baby is doing too. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Take care.
Yep, take it easy, man.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye. Thanks again to Mike King for joining me on the podcast. If you'd like to find out more about what they're doing over at Berkeley Online, we'll have a link in the show notes. They have some great classes, and if you use our link, you'll get a 10% discount off the class fee. We've actually been sending some of the CD Baby crew to their classes to get some deeper training on topics like music publishing, so check those out. Again, if you want to weigh in with comments or feedback, please do so. I mentioned all the ways you can contact us at the top of the show. And that should do it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.